My name is Ryan, I am 34 years old, and I serve as a logistics officer in the United States Army stationed in North Carolina. I always start this story the same way because it keeps me grounded, even when things around me feel heavier than they should. I have a wife who has carried more than her share of long nights and early mornings, and a little boy who still thinks every time I lace my boots means I am going somewhere heroic. Most days it is not heroic at all, but I let him hold on to that belief a little longer because it gives me something to live up to. My job is simple on paper and complicated everywhere else. I am the person who makes things move where they need to go, when they need to go, with as little noise as possible. Ammunition, supplies, vehicles, personnel, everything that keeps a unit functioning passes through a system that I am responsible for smoothing out. If something goes wrong, it is my phone that rings. If a convoy gets delayed or a shipment is mislabeled, it becomes my responsibility to fix it before anyone above me realizes how close things came to falling apart. Most people never see that part. They think logistics is paperwork and checklists, when the truth is that it is pressure stacked on pressure, all wrapped in the expectation that none of it should ever be visible. I am the guy who quietly absorbs every unexpected fire and puts it out before the heat spreads. My days start before sunrise with briefings that all sound the same but carry different risks hiding between the lines. I listen, take notes, and try to predict which part of the plan will fall apart first. Then I spend the rest of the day chasing answers, coordinating trucks, rewriting routes, and keeping tempers low enough that no one starts throwing blame before we solve the problem. It is not glamorous work, but it keeps people alive, and that has always been enough for me. The strange thing is that the more vital my job became, the easier it was for others to overlook it. The infantry guys get the medals, the officers get the credit, and the logisticians get a nod if the mission goes well or a glare if anything stumbles. People assume that smooth operations mean the system is strong, not realizing the system is usually one tired person making 10 decisions faster than he can think. That person is usually me. I never complained because complaining feels like asking for attention, and attention in my world often turns into questions I do not have time to answer. So I kept moving, solving problems quietly and letting everyone else believe it was luck or routine. Being invisible became part of the job, almost easier than being seen. Still, there were nights when I drove home with my uniform wrinkled and my hands shaking, wondering how long a man can hold an entire structure together without anyone noticing the weight. I would sit in the driveway and watch the lights inside my house, reminding myself that someone in there sees me even if no one else does. The truth is that I never wanted recognition. I only ever wanted fairness, a moment where someone understood that being the quiet one does not make you less essential. That moment had not come yet, but I kept waiting because the alternative was giving up, and that is something I have never been willing to do. It started with a standard comms update, one of those cold, clipped orders sent down from someone too far removed from the dust and heat to see what their timing meant. We were told to move a shipment of advanced ordnance into Sector Echo by sunrise, through a route that had been flagged just 3 days earlier for insurgent movement. The name on the signature line was someone I barely knew, a newly rotated major with more ambition than experience, the kind of officer who thinks speed means strength. I read the order twice, then once more with a pen in hand. The coordinates didn't make sense, and the timing was worse. The sector was still unstable, with no updated recon or friendly ground forces to receive us. If we sent that shipment through, we'd be walking a convoy of explosives straight into a blind alley, no eyes, no air cover, and no exit. I knew what that meant. Trucks could disappear out there. Crews could die. And even if they didn't, the optics of a botched weapons transport were enough to cripple morale across 2 units. But saying no wasn't an option. You don't just push back on an official order unless you're ready to put your name on a formal challenge. And even then, it rarely changes anything. I didn't have time for politics, so I rerouted quietly. I found a secondary path, 2 hours longer but cleaner, one we'd used before under heavier threat. I marked it as a recon support detour, logged it with minimal detail, and briefed the drivers under the guise of updated environmental risk. No one questioned it, not then. We made the delivery. Safe, unscathed, unnoticed. 2 days later, the original route was hit. Small arms, minor IEDs, nothing catastrophic, but enough to stall any convoy and invite headlines. No one ever asked why our shipment missed it. No one traced the change back to me. That was the point. My job wasn't to be right. My job was to make sure no one had to explain why things went wrong. That night, I sat in my bunk and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I'd made a call that saved lives, but it would never show up in a report, never reach a promotion file, never earn me a single stripe. All I could do was move to the next problem and hope that when the next bad call came through, I'd still have enough clarity left to fix it before someone paid the price. 3 days after the reroute, I was called into my CO's office without warning. The door was already shut when I arrived, blinds drawn, the kind of setup that tells you this isn't about performance. He didn't ask why I made the change. He didn't ask what I saw or what I knew. He just dropped a printout of the original order on the table and told me I had no authority to alter mission parameters. I stood there, still in dust-covered boots, listening to a man who hadn't left the base in weeks tell me I had overstepped. He didn't mention the ambush, didn't acknowledge the intel I acted on or the fact that the convoy made it through untouched. All he cared about was that I'd made a decision without running it up the chain. He used that phrase I've heard too many times, stay in your lane. I didn't argue. I knew better. There's no winning those rooms. Rank shields people from seeing the ground, and any challenge feels like a threat. I took the reprimand, nodded once, said I understood. Then I walked out and didn't speak a word for the rest of the day. But something inside me hardened, not bitter, just clear. If they didn't want to see, I'd start writing things down. That night, I opened a blank doc on my laptop. I started logging every shift, every call, every redirection I made that wasn't in the brief. No drama, just details. Coordinates, timestamps, comm logs, outcomes. I wasn't building a case, I was building memory. Because I knew this wouldn't be the last time I'd have to choose between obedience and safety. It hit me then, how easy it is to be erased in a system that only rewards the visible. I didn't want credit. I just wanted truth to exist somewhere outside of my own memory. So I kept documenting, quietly, like everything else I did. And I told myself that one day, even if no one ever asked for it, at least I'd have the record. Something real, something that said I was here, and I made the right call. It started as something small, almost quiet. I joined a private group for veterans, mostly older guys who had already made their way out of the system. They shared old stories, lessons learned, the kind of hard-earned wisdom that only comes from years in uniform. I never posted much at first, just read, watched, took in what they had to say. Then one night, after a particularly chaotic week, I shared a short update. No names, no blame, just the facts. A misrouted delivery was about to miss a critical deadline. I caught it, rerouted the convoy, and we hit the target within the window. I ended the post with one sentence: situation resolved. That was it. No context, no glory, just a note in the thread like marking time. I did the same thing the next week. Then again after that. One update, once a week. Nothing loud, never tagging the unit or anyone involved. Just problems solved and timelines held. I didn't even think anyone was reading them. I was doing it for myself, to remember the work, to give it form. Because when your job is to prevent things from falling apart, there's often nothing left to show you were ever there. Then the messages started. Quiet at first. One guy messaged to say he appreciated the clarity. Another said it reminded him of when he was in charge of logistics in Kandahar. A third just wrote, "Keep posting." It threw me. I wasn't trying to prove anything. But the more I posted, the more I realized people weren't just noticing the solutions. They were recognizing the pattern. The pressure, the silence behind the work. I kept my tone steady, always neutral. I didn't need to vent. I wasn't angry. I was just making a record. One that, for the first time, Someone outside my chain of command actually saw. That shift didn't change my job, but it started changing the way I saw myself in it, not invisible, just unspoken, until now. It came on a Tuesday night while I was cleaning out my inbox. The message was short, formal, and signed by someone whose name I recognized instantly. Retired General Mark Travers. He had led operations in 2 major theaters and now sat on several advisory boards. His message wasn't full of praise, just a quiet acknowledgement. Saw your updates. Appreciate the clarity. Let's talk sometime. I read it 3 times just to be sure it was real. Then I sat there staring at the screen, not sure what to feel. It wasn't a compliment, not really. It was something deeper. Recognition from someone who knew what it took to keep things from falling apart. He didn't ask for credentials. He already understood, and that understanding did something to me. Not loud, but solid, like weight shifting. Over the next few days, more messages came in. A former logistics chief from CENTCOM, an analyst from a defense think tank, even an operations director at a contractor I'd once tried to work for after my second deployment. None of them praised me directly. They just asked questions. Wanted to know how I handled this, how I saw that, what I'd do in certain scenarios. They were listening, really listening. And then one of them reshared a post of mine in his own group. No tag, just a note, quiet solutions, steady hands. After that, the inbox didn't stop. I got an invite to speak at a closed session panel for transition officers, then another to consult on a training module for emergency response planning. I wasn't chasing any of it, but it kept coming, like the work had finally spoken for itself. I didn't brag, didn't post about the invites or the names. I just kept doing what I'd been doing, one update at a time. No noise, just proof that somewhere out there, someone was watching. And they saw more than just a guy keeping things from breaking. They saw the shape of something that held, and that was enough. It started with a polite order, wrapped in concern. My CO called me in and said I'd been running too hot for too long. They were rotating me out for rest. A desk inside headquarters, no field calls, no mission boards, just paperwork and time to decompress. The words were calm, measured, but the intent was obvious. They weren't giving me a break. They were pulling me out. I didn't protest. I nodded, thanked him, and packed up my gear. No one needed to see the calculations already running in my head. This was a classic maneuver. Take the operator off the grid, limit his input, dull the edge before it cuts too close to command. I'd seen it done to others, officers with opinions, NCOs who raised the wrong questions. It was always dressed up like concern, but the silence that followed told the real story. In the office, I was alone. Same uniform, but no real mission. My access was narrowed. My calls were filtered. Even the unit updates stopped coming. I wasn't angry, just aware. They were isolating me before they made the next move. That's how control works in systems like this. Not loud, just slow and quiet, like a knife slipping behind your ribs. So I did what I'd always done. I watched, took notes, stayed quiet, and I prepared. Not for a fight, but for the turn. Because it always comes. The moment when silence isn't enough. When a system that feeds on obedience starts fearing observation. They thought they were sidelining me. What they didn't see was I was building my next step, piece by piece. And this time, I wasn't going to move alone. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. The silence around me only confirmed what I already knew. If I didn't lay it all out, the truth would rot behind closed doors. So I started documenting everything. Every flawed command, every misstep I covered, every report I altered to protect the mission. Not to accuse, just to reveal the full picture. A map of how close we'd come to disaster, and how many times it was quietly averted. I didn't frame it with emotion. I framed it with precision. It was clean, bullet points, timestamps, attachments where I had them. I didn't embellish or editorialize. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted someone who still believed in the mission to see the truth beneath the noise. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about what we let slide when we stopped paying attention. I addressed the report to Major General Carson. He was the one who messaged me months ago, said my posts showed leadership, not complaints. I figured if anyone still understood what accountability looked like, it was him. I didn't write a cover letter, just a subject line, Operational Risk Briefing. Sent from a secure line, no fanfare, no trail. I didn't ask for a reply. That night, I sat in my kitchen, lights off, kid asleep, laptop closed. I didn't feel fear. I felt clean. Like I'd finally stopped pretending the house wasn't on fire. This wasn't a counterattack. It was a signal. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was ready to rebuild, starting with the truth. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet like most others. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number in DC. A calm voice on the other end identified himself as someone from the Office of Defense Security. He said he couldn't share details, but wanted me to know the report had been reviewed thoroughly. They were reopening a process audit based on the data I provided. Internal protocols, decision chains, logistics breakdowns. It wasn't dramatic, but the weight of those words hit me like a silent nod from the universe. He said, off the record, it was one of the most actionable internal briefs they'd received this year. No awards, no medals, just a quiet thank you. I said I appreciated the call. He paused before adding, your leadership wasn't lost on us. I didn't say anything for a second. My throat tightened. I managed a simple response. That's all I ever wanted. The following week, things shifted. The same commander who once told me to stay in my lane now found himself under quiet scrutiny, not headlines. But his decisions were finally being reviewed. People started asking the right questions. Not about me. About the system. I didn't celebrate. I just kept showing up, same as before. But now, the silence didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like respect. The kind that doesn't need to be shouted to be understood. The sun was low and warm as I sat across from my son in the backyard, the chessboard balanced between us. He moved a piece, looked up, and smiled like the world had never tried to break anyone. I didn't think about the reports or the phone calls or the names that used to matter. I just watched him and felt the kind of peace you don't brag about. I didn't need medals or speeches. I needed to know I hadn't bent when it would have been easier to stay quiet. I wasn't a hero, I was just tired of cleaning up mistakes in silence.